Welcome to this explainer. Okay, picture this. You walk out into your yard, coffee in hand, ready to admire those carefully planted seedlings only to find them completely dug up. Or maybe you've just realized your brand new raised bed has somehow been transformed into a giant outdoor litter box. If you're nodding along right now, you know the exact frustration we're talking about today. It is incredibly discouraging to pour your time, money, and backbreaking effort into a garden only to feel like you're stuck in a constant, never-ending battle with your own pets. But today, we're going to completely shift how we approach this whole thing. Instead of punitive measures, instead of constant scolding, and definitely instead of stressing out over 24/7 supervision, we're going to look at a brilliant design-based solution. A solution that actually allows both your prized plants and your beloved pets to thrive together in the exact same outdoor space. To kick things off, here's the foundational mindset shift for our entire explainer. And it's a quote that really hits the nail on the head. You don't have a gardening problem, you have a design problem. Now, it is so tempting to blame your pet's training or lack thereof when they ruin a garden bed. But most of the time, the issue is actually much simpler than that. Your garden is unintentionally inviting them right in. Once we reframe this from being a behavioral flaw in your furry friend to an evaluation of the garden's physical environment, the solutions become incredibly clear and highly actionable. Okay, let's dive into this explainer's roadmap so you know exactly where we're heading. We'll be covering 1. Garden design errors, 2. Changing the environment, 3. The power of redirection, 4. Creating a separate zone for dogs, 5. A separate zone for cats, and finally, number 6. Achieving real harmony in the garden. Let's start right off with section 1, garden design errors, and those unintentional invites we're sending. To actually fix the issue, we first have to understand why gardens naturally attract our pets in the first place. Think about your garden for a second, but from your pet's perspective. You've got this beautifully tilled, loose soil that is wonderfully soft under their paws. Your raised beds hold all this moisture and smell rich and earthy, which immediately triggers their natural instinctive behaviors to dig and explore. And those lovely, wide wooden edges you spent all weekend building, well, to a dog or a cat, those are just convenient steps, perches, and balancing beams. Your garden is unintentionally communicating a massive, flashing yes to your pet. To them, it looks like the absolute ideal spot in the whole yard. And that, right there, is exactly why solutions based on scolding or deterrent sprays are completely ineffective in the long run. You are literally fighting against an environment that is constantly rewarding the animal. So, how do we fix this? Well, that brings us to section 2, changing the garden environment, with no more fortresses. We need to alter the physical space to communicate no, but without having to build some ugly medieval fortress around your vegetables. The very first lever most people pull is height. But here's the thing. Height works very differently depending on the pet. For dogs, a standard 12 to 18-inch garden bed basically still feels like ground level to them. But when you increase that height to around 24 to 30 inches or more, you create a very noticeable behavior shift. At 30 inches, access suddenly feels unnatural and inconvenient. For a dog, the effort simply outweighs the reward. Cats, however, they change the equation entirely. They jump and climb with incredible ease, so height alone is absolutely not going to stop them. For our feline friends, we need a totally different strategy. The smart strategy here isn't to block access completely, but rather to remove the features that make the garden so appealing to stand on. First, eliminate that standing space by using narrow, rounded, or sloped edges so there's absolutely no foothold. Second, swap out rough, high-traction timber for smooth, low-grip materials like galvanized steel or sealed wood. And finally, you can add light visual barriers. Think simple wire hoops with mesh or string grids. These don't have to be heavy-duty maximum security cages. They just need to introduce a bit of uncertainty and partially obstruct the space, which naturally discourages pets from even trying to enter. Now, for cats specifically, since we know height fails to deter them, surface management is going to be your absolute best tool. Cats are naturally drawn to that fluffy, exposed soil. If you leave it bare, you're practically guaranteeing a visit. But by covering the soil with larger bark pieces of mulch, straw, or even just light netting during the early growth phase, you are completely removing their ultimate reward. You aren't just physically blocking them, you're actually making the space incredibly unappealing to their natural instincts by replacing that comfortable dirt with a totally uninviting texture. Now we reach section 3, the power of redirection and what is truly the missing piece. This is the critical element left out of almost every gardening guide out there. We've talked a lot about keeping pets out, but what happens next? If they can't dig in the garden, they're just going to go look for another spot, right? The most effective gardens in the world don't just restrict behavior, they seamlessly redirect it. We need to create what we call a yes zone. A yes zone is a designated alternative space in your yard where your pet's natural behaviors, like digging, scratching, or marking, are completely allowed and even highly encouraged. It's simple psychology. When you make the right behavior the easiest behavior, pets will naturally stop testing your boundaries. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, creating a separate zone for dogs, specifically the digging patch. We're moving from theory into highly practical application right now. Let's look at the exact steps you need to take. Okay, here are the specific step-by-step instructions to create a highly effective dog digging area. Step 1, choose a dedicated digging patch somewhere in your yard. Step 2, fill this area with loose, soft soil or sand so it feels absolutely amazing under their paws. Honestly, much better than your newly designed, hard-to-reach garden beds. And step 3, and this is the absolute secret ingredient here, bury toys or safe, high-value objects right there in the sand. By doing this, you are actively reinforcing its use. You're making this new spot infinitely more rewarding and fun than the raised vegetable bed. Seriously, why would a dog struggle to awkwardly climb a 30-inch smooth metal planter when there's a perfectly soft sandbox literally full of hidden treasures right over here? Let's see how this concept builds for our feline friends in Section 5, creating a separate zone for cats, focusing on the sandbox area. Because cats have very specific, slightly fussy preferences, especially regarding their bathroom habits, they require a slightly different approach. For cats, the specific steps are equally deliberate, so pay attention here. Step 1, create a sandbox-style area. Step 2, ensure it is filled with that irresistible loose, soft soil, but make absolutely sure it is placed completely away from your garden beds. And Step 3, choose a quiet, low-traffic placement. This is essential, guys. Cats strongly prefer privacy and undisturbed locations for their business. If you put their brand new yes zone right next to your noisy patio or a busy backyard walkway, they're going to ignore it entirely and go right back to your nice, quiet garden beds. You have to give them the loose soil they crave and a location that perfectly mimics their natural desire for privacy. And finally, we arrive at Section 6, harmony in the garden, achieved through perfect layouts. We have our deterrents set up, we've built our awesome yes zones, but to tie everything together, we have to talk about the overall layout. Where you place these beds and zones makes all the difference in the world. The psychology of pet movement in a yard is actually fascinating. Pets follow patterns. They patrol certain specific areas and move along familiar, worn-in routes. If your garden bed sits right smack in the middle of their favorite open runway, it's immediately going to become an obstacle they have to interact with. Much smarter placement strategies include placing your beds along fences or edges where there's naturally less foot traffic. You really want to avoid those central open pathways. Furthermore, try to cluster your beds together. A group's layout feels like a single, defined solid area to a pet rather than a bunch of scattered individual targets they can weave in and out of. Respecting your pet's natural patrol routes prevents those accidental, chaotic encounters that end up ruining your plants. Now, a lot of people at this stage ask, okay, but what about training? Well, here is exactly how they differ. Design sets the default behavior. Training simply supports and reinforces that design. If your garden is super easy to access and full of soft, bare, inviting soil, training your pet to stay away from it is going to be an exhausting, constant uphill battle. But if your environment is already doing the heavy lifting for you, if the bed is 30 inches high with narrow, slippery edges, and there is a brilliant, toy-filled yes zone just a few feet away, training becomes incredibly easy. You are no longer fighting the environment tooth and nail. You are just gently reinforcing a choice the environment is already naturally encouraging them to make. A beautifully designed, pet-friendly garden shouldn't ever feel restricted, and it certainly shouldn't require your constant hovering supervision. It should just feel natural for everyone who uses it. So I want to leave you with this thought to chew on. Look out at your yard today. Where will you redesign the space? Where is the absolute perfect spot to build that yes zone so your pet finally says yes to the right behavior, leaving your beautiful garden to grow in total peace? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy designing!